So what happened with Joker 2? Well, I'll tell you what happened. It wasn't very good, but on the other hand, I also don't think it's as bad as everyone is making it out to be, so let's talk about this thing. Now, as always, this will be a spoiler-free review, but if you do want to see what I gave this movie out of 10, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about the controversial movie that is Joker Folie. So this movie is directed by returning director Todd Phillips, and it is a full-on musical. And I was actually kind of shocked at the amount of people that were surprised that this was a musical, because from day one when this movie was announced, they made it pretty clear that it was going to be a musical. Anyways, in this one we follow Arthur Fleck as he tries to figure out his identity between Arthur and the Joker. But along the way, he of course meets Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga, and he builds and forms a relationship with her. Starting things off with the good, I of course have Joaquinn Phoenix and Lady Gaga. Now these two are both talented actors, so you expect them to bring their A game in just about everything they are in, and in this movie, in my opinion, they 100% do that. Joaquinn Phoenix jumps right back into the role of being Arthur Fleck, and he does a really good job at showing the struggle that Arthur was having during this movie of figuring out if he was more Joker or if he was just Arthur Fleck. And a lot of his best scenes, in my opinion, came when they were in the courtroom, especially when he was playing Joker in the courtroom. Then we have Lady Gaga, who I think did a really good job playing Harley Quinn in this movie. I mean, it even sounded like she tweaked her voice just a little bit to sound more like that classic Harley Quinn that we know, but of course she really shines in those musical numbers in this film. And this really isn't a surprise, but her voice was phenomenal in this thing, and even though in my opinion the songs weren't anything special in this thing, she made them better just because she was singing them. And then you combined her with Joaquinn Phoenix and putting them on screen together, the chemistry was there and they were both just so captivating to watch together, even though their characters were a part of a story that wasn't so great. Next up for the good, I have the visuals and just overall cinematography of this film. Now, the first Joker had great cinematography and this second one follows that trend. I mean, this movie was just aesthetically pleasing to look at. The cinematography was at its best during the musical numbers. I mean, some of the sets they created for these numbers were just so creative. They were packed with vibrant and contrasting colors, and at times you kind of felt like you were watching a Broadway musical during some of those numbers. Also, in a lot of these shots, they would use a frame within a frame to frame up the subject, and I am just a big sucker for those types of shots, and there were plenty of those in this movie. And for those of you who may not know what a frame within a frame is, it's pretty simple. It's just when someone uses something that already exists in their shot to frame up their subject in said shot. And an example of this would be when they used Arthur's jail cell door window to frame him within that shot. The lighting was also phenomenal in this movie. I really loved how they used the lighting to kind of further convey the emotions of what was going on in that certain scene. And my favorite example of this was when Harley and Arthur kissed for the first time, I believe it was, but essentially behind Arthur it was lit up orange, and then on Harley's side of the screen it was lit up blue from the projector. And then when they finally kissed, it all went orange to kind of symbolize them finally becoming a couple or becoming one color. It's shots like that that I really enjoyed because it gave this movie a sense of style and character, and I can really appreciate that in a world that sometimes overuses CGI and green screens. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to stuff like that, but I will always appreciate a movie that feels like it was shot in a real setting instead of just on a soundstage in front of a blue or green screen somewhere. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is the musical elements in this thing. Now, I knew going in that this was going to be a musical, and I don't think any of the songs are terrible in this movie. Actually, there was one song that I really liked in this thing, but it was the way that they used the musical elements that, in my opinion, didn't really work for me. Essentially, it felt like they would just stop the movie to go off to this fantasy land to have this big musical number, and that just made it feel like the songs were being forced into the movie. And then on top of that, these big musical numbers and these songs didn't really enhance or advance the plot at all, and that's what really bothered me the most about the music in this thing. By the time you get to the end of this thing, you're just kind of sick of the music and want it to stop, because even though these big musical numbers look good visually and the songs aren't necessarily bad, there's just way too much of it and it does nothing for the plot of the movie. And finally, getting into the bad, and the big thing I have here is really just everything with the story. I mean, I was in shock at just how uninteresting and boring this story was. It just felt so disjointed, and it felt like this movie didn't know if it wanted to be a court drama, a musical, or a love story. And this movie kind of jumped back and forth between all three of these elements, and it really just didn't flow all that well in the end. A lot of this film, you feel like you're just waiting for something to happen, and not much does. I mean, this film kind of repeats the same formula over and over again, and it kind of makes it feel repetitive. Essentially, it's have a sequence, then have a big musical number that's way too long and doesn't advance the plot, and then just keep on repeating that until we get to the end of the movie. And after a while, as much as I like the visuals and the performances in this movie, that just gets boring, and it made a film that was only 2 hours and 20 minutes feel like 3 hours. This also has a lack of character development, and by that I mean it felt like Arthur went on the same journey in this film that he did in the first film, except in this movie he reverts back to who he was at the beginning of the first film, if that makes sense. And then for Harley Quinn, at least in my opinion, she really didn't have much of a character arc at all, because a lot of her character felt like it revolved around the Joker or Arthur. Then we have an ending that pretty much just says, yeah, you know, all that stuff you just saw in the first and second movie, yeah, it doesn't matter at all. And then they kind of teased that it may have been an origin story or a creation of a certain Joker that I really like and is a part of my favorite movie of all time. You probably know exactly which movie and which Joker I am talking about. So yeah, I didn't really like that aspect of the beginning. But on the other hand, when I get more critical about this ending, there is something kind of poetic about it. So there is just a teeny tiny part of me that kind of likes this ending as well. At the end of the day, this didn't feel like a new story at all. It was more of an extended epilogue to the first film. So overall, at least for me, Joker Folie Deux is a disappointment. It does have some flashes of good with its performances and visuals, but that does not make up for all the bad that was the story. So yes, this is one you can definitely skip or wait for streaming. Those are my thoughts on Joker Folie Deux. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.